Well, welcome back, family. Thanks so much for keeping it locked at 97.7 FM and the CJ Road Show. Had a great conversation with Tyrone Hendricks, representative of Ward 6, on our city council. Great information and insights about things that concern the city of Jackson. Now we're going to sort of turn from the local to the national. Many of you have heard about the controversy with a particular predominantly white fraternity, Greek letter organization, Sigma Alpha Epsilon at the University of Oklahoma, and the controversial song that talks about no ends in the SAE. So we actually have a gentleman on today, Mr. Joshua Quinn, who goes by Dr. Drjsapio, who wrote a very powerful and moving article on his blog, and it's got a lot of circulation around the nation. He's been called by CNN and other national news organizations. So, Joshua, thanks for being on today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, and thanks for sharing your perspective, and very excited to hear your insights on this. So, let's get right into it. So, this racist chant with this predominantly white Greek letter organization, there's a tendency among certain members of our community to say, well, this is why we need to change SAE, for instance. Let's protest and then let's try to integrate and let's get in. You were like, well, no, we got our own organizations that have been around for 100 plus years. Talk a little bit about why you wrote the piece and why you believe Black Greek letter organizations are still relevant.
Well, in this day and age, you have a lot of disdain, degradation, and fear of Black lives or just black skin. Mm-hmm. And there's always seemed to be an instance of us trying to love so much towards people, well, I'm not going to say all white people, or people who just don't think that Black lives matter. Mm-hmm. And we were always integrating in my opinion, from an economic and political standpoint, it has failed us. So such things such as our music, we don't own hip-hop anymore. It's controlled predominantly by white corporations. We don't own our schools. In my opinion, the only thing that we have that's a booming business is the church, in my opinion. And I don't understand, why don't we have banks? Why don't we have businesses that we own? Why do we have to succumb to cash checking institutions? Those aren't even owned by Black people. So I think it's a time now, using that moment, not to protest. Of course we can fight racism and all of that, but I think now is the time for us to start owning things. Right. If nobody's going to accept you, you have to build your own thing.
That's a great point. I've actually been thinking recently, and I know I'm going to get a lot of folks mad when I say this. Public accommodations should have been desegregated because public monies are used to run those. So public schools, public transit, etc. But I really began to wrestle with, why do we really need to integrate lunch counters? My thing is, if they don't want if you're not good enough to be Black in their institution, then they don't deserve the money.
Absolutely.
And we had businesses and we had restaurants that, quite frankly, floundered and failed after integration because most of us stopped patronizing those businesses, many of them were good businesses, strong businesses. And so to your point, the fact that these particular Black Greek organizations emerged wasn't first and foremost because Black folks said, hey, let's go start Black Greek letter organizations, right? It was the door was closed to them and these other organizations. It said, let's do our own thing. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that seems to be an offensive statement, though, when maybe you say, hey, protesting is cool, but let's go and produce something, let's build something, let's actually build our own institutions or support those we got?
Well, I like that question. Well, you have to ask yourself, who says it's offensive? So, in my mind, if we're always hearing this rhetoric about Black people need to pick their own selves up and pull themselves by the bootstraps and stop living off the government, and then when we start creating these institutions and organizations, there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Why do you have BET? Why do you have Black this, Black that? you told us to. So it seems like to me you're saying you want my freedom on your account. You control whether I'm free or not. I'm not doing that. So I think now is a good time to love being black when so much is against us at the time. We need to be teaching entrepreneurship and paying attention to economics and politics. You know, we need to be doing more than just being on the basketball team and start owning the basketball team. It seems as if, like I said in my blog, just say for example, if all the black football players from these Big Ten schools just got fed up with it, got fed up with being used and not being paid, and they just walked off the field. What would that do to these institutions? When you know they make millions of dollars, and we need to have that state of mind. You know, if you won't accept me, fine, I will build my own empire.
Wow. So I'm assuming that most of the folks listening are familiar with Black Greek life, but talk a little bit about, maybe not a particular one, but just in general, what's the history behind why these Black Greek letter organizations emerged? And, you know, one of the things I also saw on your blog was why certain segments of the African American community decided to employ or embrace Greek symbols and Greek mythology and all that as a part of these organizations.
Okay. I guess the emergence of Greek life, like I said, it's pretty simple. It's just like a normal black person deciding I'm not going to live my life this way anymore, so I'm going to do something for myself. If I can't go into your store, I'm going to build a store. If I can't be in your organization, I'm going to make my own organization. And they know that there's some other people that are thinking the same thing. So I think that's simply what it was. And the backdrop to that was, like I said, every community, every church, every ethnic group has their dysfunction. So there was a dysfunction between those who weren't educated and those who were educated. We still deal with that now. It seems to be that a lot of people assume that Black Greeks are the cream of the crop and we're stuck up and things like that. However, there are some stuck up and pretty difficult people in the organization, but that's in any organization. And well, your second question was.
So related to that, in creating these organizations, why did they employ sort of the same Greek mythology and symbolism that was in the white organization? Some people say, well, if we're Africans, why are we using Greek letters?
Oh, you have to consider that time and period. Those people weren't that far removed from slavery, and so everybody didn't have knowledge of their African history. That was the whole point of slavery. Create this new Negro to where he doesn't know who he is or who she is. So at the moment, you can only go by what you know. It was later, when people became more educated, they realized that Greek history is ultimately Greek. Everything came from Africa, came from Egypt, which came from Ethiopia. So there is not saying that we're embracing being Greek. We know that we're black, but there's no sense of changing it. It's fine, and there's a lot of Greek people that don't know the African roots of all of that. But you can't cram thousands of years of our history into a process, or you can't cram 1,000 years of our history into a classroom. They won't even cram it in a day. Right. But it takes, like I said, when you start loving yourself and start embracing not only your blackness or your black womanness or your black manness, you'll start wanting to know more about yourself. When you finally realize that you're walking around here with a last name like Quinn or Rhodes and it's not your real name, you have to ask yourself, who am I? Start digging deep. Do the DNA test. They're available, but people don't publicize those type of things. There are celebrities that are doing their DNA and going back to Cameroon and Togo and Sierra Leone. There's a lot of people who aren't celebrities. They're doing it right now, but that's not being publicized in the media because we're not allowed to be free. We're not allowed to think for ourselves.
Yeah. Well,
Well, another interesting thing to that point, this weekend or next week we're going to be celebrating, or people will be celebrating St. Patty's Day and turning rivers and ponds green and drinking green beer and all that in celebration of Irish identity. So it's interesting that, and also I was looking online at there's a residence somewhere in the area called like Scottish Inn or something like that. And I was kind of thinking to myself, how would we feel we had, Zulu Inn? It just seems as if in our culture we disparage all things African, right? Even when we say that we are being Pan-Africanists, we still don't dig deep in, we have this sort of still a mythical sense of we almost want to make Africa a big city, as if everyone's the same. So what I'm hearing you saying though is, identify who you are, be proud of that heritage, and then embody it in various ways. And in some regard, Black Greek organizations have helped, especially college-educated men and women, do that. On the other side, I will ask you this, because you talk about the relevance. There are some who talk about, here those groups are 100-something years later, and folks just want to wear the letters, the colors, stroll and dance and things like that. So they're like, so kind of the questions that happen on the Black church. What the Black church doing now? They're like, what the Greeks doing now? So talk a little bit about that. What are Greeks doing that you know of, and then what more could Greeks do besides what's, because I wanted to be fair. Just because there are a few folks who join who only want the letters doesn't mean that everyone joins for that.
Absolutely.
But then there's also more that can be done in our community. So talk a little bit about that.
Just like Black people, Greek life is not a monolithic group. We have our different organizations where we all have some of the same goals, and it's not like we're just these preppy Black people that don't have fun and or we're just trying to have a status. But there are some people that just do it for status. I mean, they drink, they party, they dance, they do a whole lot of stuff, but they're also mothers and fathers and politicians and engineers and mentors. A lot of things that I focus on is mentorship. I came out of a group, that's a spin-off, a mentoring program from my organization. And that's the biggest reason why I chose that organization, because it made me into a man. I learned the history. When I wasn't getting in schools, I was reading their history. So, when you don't have a sense of yourself, even in a formal education, if that's what you want to call it, you got to find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about the blog itself. I think I saw that you were up in like 200,000 hits. What has it been like? What has it been like to? And I've sort of looked at the blog. So you've been blogging for a while. You've got a number of posts. This one took the nation by storm. Why do you think that happened, and how have you responded to feedback you've been getting around the country?
I think it's a conversation that people who are Greek have had, even with their white friends. It's things that we talk about. Like I said, we're not immune to racism just because we're part of these prestigious organizations. It's these aren't shields we wear on our chest or anything. You're not going to keep us from getting shot because they're not looking at the letters; they're looking at your skin. And I didn't intend for it to take a life of its own. Me personally, I'm not into fame. I'm more into freedom. I'm more laid back. I prefer to be at home, reading a book, having a glass of wine, and chilling with my dog. Everyone knows I love my dog. But like I said, actually, this is something that I prayed for. I wanted to be a voice, and if that took, that happening, and me getting out my house and my web designer continuously trying to keep me on my toes when I just want to sit down and relax and be at home.
That's a brilliant point, right? and that goes back to the whole reason why Black Greeks exist. You talked about when you said freedom, I automatically thought about liberation. You're talking about freedom, like I just want to relax. I don't want to have to deal with anybody.
Liberation as well.
Well, that too, but I'm saying like the fact that chilling in the house, being sort of introvert, being that's cool for you, but you have the impetus to now be more of a public voice.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what happens, right? People are, it's almost like, not to get too spiritual, God says, tag, you're it.
Yeah.
You don't really want to be it, but like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, now I got to
Yeah.
speak. I got to, leave my dog at the house for a while. And put down the glass of wine in the book and do this kind of stuff. So that speaks then to, issues of mentorship and reaching out and reaching back, that a lot of times many of us would rather not be very public. But because of the state of our condition, some of us have no choice but to step up and stand in the gap.
Yeah, I guess it happened so fast, and things were happening really, really fast. And I'm the type of person, like my webmaster was just like, we got to do this, we got to do that. Do you understand what's going on right now? And I'm like, oh, okay. Because like, I think I have a fear of fame. That's not just something I'm interested in. I didn't grow up like that.
Right.
I had a well-off family, but like my father was a pastor, and when we would go to people's house, they would bring out their finest china, and my parents would be like, we can eat from a paper plate as long as the food's good. Right. I grew up like that, so I kept trying to keep my mind focused and stable. I didn't want to blow up. So, like I said, the CNN and the MSNBC, it was fine, but...
So let me ask you this then. This is more of a personal question. Do you think there's a distinction between fame and visibility? Right. I remember, for instance, talking to Katina Rankin, who used to be on Channel 3 here, and I had the same mindset. Like, I hate what seems to be self-promotion. She was like, you got to tell people that you're doing this and doing this. And no, if they hear about it, they will. And she was like, if you have a gift, it's irresponsible of you to hold the gift and not share it, right? And so maybe instead of looking at it as, oh, this is a 15-minute fame moment, it's more, this is an opportunity to make visible and viable a conversation that we could be having, and you could be part of that movement. You talked earlier about institution building, part of doing that. Did you?
I didn't realize the impact it would make until I saw it in my city. Seeing
Channel 16.
It gives me kind of choke up when I think about it. I was at the gas station, and this older gentleman walked up to me and he said, weren't you on the news? I said, yes, sir. He grabbed my hand and he was like, he was like, I'm paraphrasing right now. He was like, we always see black men in the city being shot or killed. It was just good to see, black men doing something good. And he was like, it done me good in his old man voice, and I was like, oh man, don't do me like that. And then, yesterday I was driving, stopped at the stoplight, and this lady honked her horn, and she had her window down. She asked me, was I on the news? I said yes. And she was like, I love your article, I'm a Delta. And I was just having a discussion with my children. She telling me a joke. She was like, they better not pay their bill, because I'm not gonna pay for it. But I didn't know it. I didn't think it was gonna have that much impact, because now she's gonna teach her children. If they're not getting that history in the schools, there's that element. Even if they don't, you don't have to be pledge your organization. But at least you have that aspect of history, and it goes further, so she can continue to teach that history. So I appreciate it. It's just I guess I have to get used to it. I've been popular, and then I had to force myself to go into the background, and because it was just too much for me. Like I said, I like writing and sitting behind my computer as opposed to radio, but it's fun.
Well, it's interesting. I feel the same way. People don't believe that I'm a shy, introverted person. I almost hate going out to restaurants. In fact, I was driving down. I was going to go to Luby's last night. I looked and saw so many folks. Like, you know what? Too many people. So I think there is something about that. But at the same time, one of the things we talk about on this show is that it's about ordinary Jacksonians doing things to change their communities. And I think this moment in this minute has been at least a very powerful reminder to a lot of people, especially to those who pledged and who are Greek. But for folks like me who are not Greek, looking at what more can we do with the institutions we have, and whether that's the church, whether that's our schools, taking pride in what, I think back to whether you're talking about Greek organizations founded hundreds or so years ago, or communities founded a few hundred years ago. Think about, we had very little access to anything. We had very little education, literacy, finances, and yet we built things. And here we are with more access to federal and state monies and all kinds of stuff. And sometimes it's hard for us to recognize, hey, we can actually build something or nurture what we do have. If we did right by what we do have and interrogate what we have and make it stronger and better, no telling how we could change our city or change our world.
I actually had this conversation with my godfather, who's also a pastor. He gets on me all the time for not going to church. I'm going eventually. But we had a discussion about, we have our difference of opinion concerning the state of the church right now. And so he proposed to me to make a proposal. What can you do as a person on the outside? I think he was calling me a heathen.
Now, what can you as a heathen do?
But yeah, I proposed, since we have a lot of churches in our communities, why not use some of that money that we're taking in, like, isn't it like $4 million-ish? Use it to build community gardens or teach children how to grow their own food. That's where a lot of us came from. We weren't all city boys and city girls and stuff like that. And that speaks to power, economic power, growing and being powerful, being able to grow your own food, control your own resources. That's what it's about nowadays.
Well, I appreciate your godfather's statement, because I think whether it's we're talking about the church or Black Greeks, the reality is, as Dr. Jerry Young says, some people are more green than they are mean. They just don't know any better. A lot of times, I've gone to churches all throughout the state, and you recognize that there are a number of folks who want to do something different, but just don't know how to or what to do, because many of them are suffering and struggling, and so it's. And going to the Greeks, some of them, I didn't know about this issue. I didn't know about. All I knew is I wanted to, have girls. I wanted to have a great college experience. Yeah. And so it takes someone taking the other person and saying, look, there's more to this than this. It's okay to go to church and shout and fall out. It's okay to stroll or whatever if you're Greek. But after you've done that, there's more to be done. There's more to be. And sometimes we have to be reminded of that.
I try to tell even the young people that I mentor, or just friends or family or whatever, you don't have to be a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X, to make a difference. You don't have to sit in front of a podium and have a bullhorn and stuff like that. We have other people that made changes. We had, let's see, off the top of my head, we had Dorothy Height. We had people who, I'm trying to think of, let's see, people who made an impact. Langston Hughes, he wrote. Richard Wright from Mississippi. We had people that dance. They sing songs. We had the song Mississippi. Can I say the word? Never mind.
Yeah. I gotta call my manager.
Want to keep you employed. But yeah, there's so many avenues where we can go to create change. I like to talk. I'm not a shy person, but I just prefer to write. I can get things out better when I write. And I tell my children I mentor all the time, find yourself. Just find yourself. Don't come to me, ask me, explain what I need to do. Find it.
Right.
And then, I sound like my dad.
I notice the older I get, the more I talk to like, man, I'm my dad all over again. That's powerful, and I think Yeah, and I want to thank you for allowing yourself to have that information channeled through your blog. I do think it's important as someone who does blog and write and communicates best in writing. That's a part of our culture that we haven't embraced fully. We haven't elevated it. That writing is liberative. Writing can change the world. Writing can be emancipatory. And just think what you've done with this conversation. You've given a number of Black Greeks, the sense of, you know what, he's right. We exist for a reason, and helping them to reestablish this sense of why they did it in the first place. And then for those who may not be Greek, as the older gentleman said, you've seen the young, articulate brother with his pants up on TV, not because he's going to jail, but because he's trying to free people. Very powerful. So thank you so much, Joshua. Very quickly, if folks wanted to reach you, if you don't mind them contacting you between your wine drinking and sitting with your dog, how can they reach you?
You can follow me on our Facebook page, Dr. Drjsapio. Is Dr. How you spell it? J-S-A-P-I-O. DrJsapio.com. I have Twitter, DrJsapio.com. Just Dr. Drjsapio. And I have the YouTube page, Dr. Drjsapio. And the email, drjsapio@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, again, Joshua Quinn, Dr. Drjsapio, thanks so much for being on the show.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And hopefully this won't be your last time on the CJ Roadshow.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. We had a great show. Tune in for next week. We're going to be talking to Ariel Nave of the Jackson Free Press. We're going to go a little deeper into this whole thing about water and infrastructure. It's going to be kind of a heady conversation, but we hope that it will be informative for you. Until next Sunday, be blessed.